mentioned, whenever she sees you with the two black eyes, she smiles in a way because it just exemplifies your toughness. Just, do you feel tough in these kinds of situations with these two black eyes?
I mean, that's what people keep telling me. Every time she sees me, she smiles and then she says, "I'm so sorry." I'm like, you don't need to be sorry. This is what it is. And when I'm playing, like, I forget about it, and then I go look at the mirror. I'm like, oh shit, they're still there. So yeah, I don't really think too much about it because I don't necessarily feel them all the time.
Yeah, and you're still able to see completely fine?
Yeah. Originally, I was like, I just need to get the swelling to go down in my forehead. So I put a patch, slept with it. The next day, woke up, and I was like, okay, the bump is almost gone, but now I have two black eyes. So that was tragic. But I mean, it's at this point, it's unfortunately won't be able to hide it. People know, so just rolling with it.
Were you able to hide it for the photo shoots?
Makeup artist did a really, really, really good job. And people that hadn't met me before were like, oh, I can't even tell. I'm like, okay, that's good. We'll take it. But I'm hoping they'll do some editing. And
what if the worst betrayal in professional sports took place somewhere other than the bright lights of the championship stage, but in a locker room's quiet, secret nooks? What if you believed that your teammates were battling next to you? You were sharpening the knives behind your back in secret. That's the reality that Indiana is experiencing. And it's much darker than anything you'll ever see on camera. Since the WNBA sells you a tale of fortitude, selflessness, and perseverance, the reality behind the curtain is terrifying. Not only did the Indiana Fever lose their finest player, Caitlin Clark, they did more than simply observe her fall due to an alleged injury. No, what actually occurred was that the coaches and players on her own team, who were meant to defend her, turned on her in silence. Instead of simply moving on, they erased her and replaced her. What's the most startling aspect? They persuaded everyone to support it. Every highlight reel, every speech given after the game, and every inspirational statement about perseverance was more than just winning games. It was about burying the one star who filled their void and the one player who made them important. Venues, the one aspect of the franchise that had grown too strong to manage. Odyssey Sims stated, "She wasn't just talking about herself. She was revealing the fact that you can be on the A team one day and off the next. Harsh reality of the system, a system that disregards sacrifice, loyalty, and doesn't give a damn about the players that are responsible for entire leagues." And the evidence for that system? It took the shape of one speech, one game, and one terrifying statement made by Aaliyah Boston. Initially, it sounded like inspiration, leadership, and the kind of soundbite you would anticipate from a rising celebrity. However, you discover it wasn't inspiration when you take a deeper look and remove the headlines and highlight clips. Not at all. It was an announcement that the coup against Caitlin Clark was finished, a warning, and a proclamation. This evening, we are discussing more than simply basketball. We are discussing the ultimate form of betrayal. We are discussing how our franchise can instantly change history, and how a guy who ought to have been hailed as the league's savior became into its greatest danger. You're going to hear the narrative they don't want you to know, so stay with me. The Indiana Fever desires that you have faith in a lovely tale. They want you to witness a group of people who have persevered through hardship and made sacrifices, and uplifted by unwavering character. Sports fans love this kind of story. The tough underdogs who persevere through suffering, who never moan, and who demonstrate to the world that resilience and solidarity can triumph over all obstacles. In post-game interviews, their coach tells a story that is meant to make you feel something. She discusses these women's personalities, daily sacrifices, and the dignity of fighting. With fighters who don't give up, it appears to be motivating. T seems genuine. T seems worthwhile supporting. However, no one is brave enough to speak the truth aloud. That narrative is untrue, a strong, alluring deception that conceals the ugly underneath. Because until you ask the difficult question, who is actually being sacrificed? Sacrifice just seems honorable. It is portrayed as courage when a player perseveres through an injury for the benefit of the team. When a participant remains silent regarding the suffering is presented as toughness. However, what happens if that sacrifice isn't an option? What occurs when a participant is forced back onto the court because the team needs a symbol to maintain their narrative, not because she's ready? Alive. That is exploitation, not toughness. And the betrayal's primary component is this. The Fever told a tale of tenacity, to maintain control over their players rather than to honor them. Instead of victims, they wanted people to see warriors. They desired the headlines to state sacrifice as opposed to concealment. They wanted you to think that wounds were only transient hindrances rather than blazing red warning signs about a system that prioritizes appearance over honesty. Because it plays, the deception is effective. On feeling, you might think, wow, that's dedication, if you have a bruised face or a taped-up ankle. However, what you actually see is a desperate situation. Players are being pushed to the edge, encouraged to keep grinning and battling. Wants you to think that. And the first, most obvious instance of this deception, it appeared as a single player, Hall, Lexi. Lexi Hall never requested to be a symbol. All she wanted to do was play hoops. However, during this storm, the propaganda campaign of the illness used her body as a canvas. All began with a violent collision that required hospitalization. For assessment, there are whispers of a potential fracture and 2 black eyeballs swelling over her face. The majority of players in that situation would be given time to recover, not only for their own well-being but also because such a serious facial injury is no little setback. However, she immediately returned to the court in Indiana, being paraded out like a badge of honor. It was an obvious message. This is the appearance of toughness. The story was written nearly immediately. For Lexi, beat LA.AN inspiring rallying cry. Fans, to foster a moment of emotional solidarity and demonstrate that Caitlin Clark wasn't necessary for the Fever because they had fighters who could play through any situation. However, when the surface is removed, the image becomes considerably darker. The team never wanted to respond to questions posed by fans. Did the medical professionals purposefully minimize Lexi's injury? Merely to keep her on the ground? Was the toughness plot more about the team's desperation than it was about her tenacity? To discover a fresh hero, the act even involved her own relatives. Lexi's mom quickly took to social media, praising people for their support and referring to her daughter as a difficult kid. Was that, however, the voice of a family or parent compelled to do damage control in order to preserve the official narrative? Then there's Lexi herself. After the injury, pay close attention to what she says. She expresses relief that it wasn't a fracture or a concussion, and that returning to play made her feel fantastic. Her tone, however, conveys a different message. She keeps saying that. She seems to be attempting to convince herself that she is all right. She acknowledges seeing 2 black eyes when she wakes up. She acknowledges the awful nature of the situation. Felt. Does that sound like a young athlete attempting to minimize her suffering, or like a warrior applauding tenacity? Does the system that surrounds her prevent her from acknowledging her weakness? The true tragedy is that her wounds weren't merely medical. Problem, they were transformed into marketing. Lexi was utilized as a pawn and a diversion rather than being praised as a player. A toughness signal intended to distract fans from the superstar's absence from the floor. And that's the main query the Fever never wanted you to inquire. Why did they want to make a new hero so badly? Why did they require a narrative that didn't include Caitlin Clark? The instant Aaliyah Boston into the spotlight, the answer would become abundantly evident. An enforcer is necessary for every conspiracy, and for the Indiana Fever, that enforcer wasn't lurking in the background. She was controlling the game while standing at center court and grinning as if nothing were happening. The way Aaliyah Boston performed against. With 22 points, 11 rebounds, a career high, and 6 steals, the sparks were the stuff of highlight reels. She completed the triumph with a defensive stop in the closing moments. On paper, she was more than simply a celebrity. She was the night's hero. The athlete who kept her squad afloat when things appeared to be falling apart. The narrative was promoted in this manner. Was that, however, the truth? Or was Boston's ascent more about showing something to the world than it was about encouraging her teammates? Front desk as well as to Caitlin Clark herself. Because her words, rather than her stat line, were the true turning moment. Boston gave what appeared to be a motivational speech in front of the cameras. Next woman up. For the casual fan, it was about perseverance, about bridging the gap caused by injury, and about sustaining the season, regardless of the challenges. However, others with the ability to read between the lines, such as insiders and analysts, perceived something far darker. This was a declaration and a coded message that Caitlin Clark wasn't simply missing, not a call to action. She was being swapped out. Next woman up focused on succession rather than unity. Boston was informing the world. You don't need her, I can lead this crew. And when you combine those remarks with her commanding performance, it becomes evident that this was more than simply a fantastic basketball night. It was an audition, a demonstration of strength. A show that Boston could represent the team if the Fever decided to let go of the star who had brought millions of new admirers. Consider it. The most well-known figure in women's basketball, Clark was a rookie who changed. Sitting on the sidelines in street clothes was the league's nightly visibility. Boston, meanwhile, was performing on the court. Her professional performance, portrayed as the bold team leader who didn't require its star player. Lexi Hull's injuries had already established the lie of resilience, but Boston's ascent provided the lie. Teeth AT provided the group with a new focal point, a new leader, and a new story to tell. We're not simply getting by without Caitlin Clark is doing well. To that point, the true concerns regarding Clark's absence began to surface. To get out of hand, the Fever's quiet over Caitlin Clark was deafening for weeks and no new information. There is no precise timeline, simply the same ambiguous justification for a groin injury that is used on a daily basis. 17 games, 17 nights of unanswered questions. Analysts and fans pleaded with the team for clarification. Details, and each time there was only stillness. However, a press release was not the source of the truth. IT wasn't a coach. The front office wasn't even the source of it was from a teammate, and she was completely unaware of what she was speaking. Sophie Cunningham presented what may be the most damning revelation of the whole story on her podcast. She revealed information that no one in the Fever organization had while casually discussing Caitlin Clark. Never ventured to utter in public.